to lead you through this domain. And before we dive in, we wanted to give just a quick review of last week. So last week, Tanika and Pam covered Domain 1, which was organization management. And the video from that session is on YouTube, so this is actually a link. If you want to click on that, it'll take you over to the YouTube channel that I set up for us. And you may want to revisit this domain, or if you weren't able to join us last week, then I would definitely recommend checking that out. Julie and I put together a little cheat sheet based on their presentation last week that breaks down the content for this domain. So just as a reminder, under organization management, it covers everything from general management to branding and positioning, financial management, globalization, and how to kind of step through the process of whether or not that's right for your association, and then strategic planning and strategic thinking. So you might want to print this out as a cheat sheet to help refresh your memory. One nice thing that we're finding, obviously, as we move through our studies is that there's a lot of overlap between the different domains, and that's actually good because it's reinforcing a lot of these subdomains and the content within them. So today we're going to talk about leadership, and that's 14 to 16% of the exam content for the CAE. So the sub-areas within leadership are general leadership, ethics, diversity, interpersonal skills, and negotiation. So leadership is kind of a common thread throughout a lot of the domains, and ethics and diversity you'll see come up again in different domains as well. So this will be a good kind of kickoff for that, but we will definitely see this again. Oh, that was bad. Okay. Starting with general leadership. It's important to keep in mind the characteristics that define an effective leader when we're trying to define leadership itself. So some of these from our reading are characteristics that leaders have, good leaders, good chief staff executives, everything from creating vision to making sure that that vision is communicated clearly across every level of the organization. The CSE acts as an agent of change. They build partnerships, so they put the R in that LERP acronym that we love so much. They need to value diversity, demonstrate servant leadership, manage information, which is a big one. We're going to talk a lot about data throughout all these domains. And then ensure balance, and that's balance from everything from priorities to a balance of perspectives, which we'll also touch on today. And so we wanted to remind you with this little nugget that leadership is a core function of a good chief staff executive. It requires being in tune to regularly scheduled activities, but also keeping your eyes scanning the horizon and open to unplanned events that might require your attention. So making sure we keep that CSE mindset at the front of our heads while we're going through the exam. 3 things to consider for leadership are judgment-based decision-making. So that's everything from utilizing qualitative and quantitative data to guide your decisions, to establishing and implementing policies to ensure transparency. So for example, conflict of interest policies. Facilitating individual participation, making sure that there's ownership in group decision-making and that you're building consensus so that that will increase the effectiveness at the board level and at the staff level. Strategic thinking is a huge one. So you want to make sure you're integrating strategic leadership into everything you do, that you're calculating risk and your exposure to risk and what that looks like for your association. So typically associations are a little more risk averse than maybe for-profit organizations, and just kind of thinking through what that looks like and how you determine your risk tolerance at the board level, at the staff level, and at the membership level. Making sure that you are taking that into account when you're looking at your long-term goals, ensuring that everything you do from your communications, your programs, your products and services reflect diversity and that they address and take into account the unique aspects of your membership. You want to facilitate board activities, process, and objectives to advance your mission. And again, this relationship piece that is so important in everything that we're reading, That's everything from the organizational culture, and so there was a lot of information about establishing your organizational culture throughout everything from job descriptions to your mission to your strategic plan, making sure that that culture is sensitive and responsive to the needs and values of the entire membership. So every segment, no matter how small, needs to be represented. Also under relationships, you're providing guidance to board members and leadership, and you want to assist them in fully executing their responsibilities. Obviously, this is our day job, not theirs. You want to engage in collaborative leadership with your stakeholders and make sure that outcomes are mutually beneficial. One of the pieces under ethics that we'll talk about is the AASLD standards of conduct, and so you want to comply with those and model ethical behavior in all of your relationships. And of course, create a climate of inclusiveness, which we'll also talk a lot more about. We'll talk about under this relationship piece, coaching and mentoring everyone from your staff to your volunteer leaders, just to help them develop those skills and increase their effectiveness. You want to advance your staff's professional and personal development in order to build a stronger organization, and you want to make sure you have strong conflict resolution skills. So one thing to keep in mind as we're kind of going through the exam is to remember that leadership questions are sneaky, and sometimes it may look like it's a legal question or a question from a different domain, maybe a program or membership question, but it might actually be a leadership question. So it's important to have that lens and kind of look through that since it overlaps with so many other areas. And that's something we talked about in our kickoff class as well. We actually had one of those as an example. So another important piece is remembering that there's a difference between being a manager and being a leader. So as the chief staff executive, you're a leader. You want to set that strategic vision and goals, and then the managers will translate that vision into action. You have followers and you lead people. Managers have subordinates and they manage projects. So it's, again, just kind of taking that step out of the details and out of the nitty-gritty and making sure you have that CSE lens. There's a huge list of comparators in the CAE kickoff book just to help you draw some of those distinctions between leaders and managers. So one of the books that's recommended reading for leadership is The 7 Measures of Success. This is actually a really quick and easy read and pretty enjoyable, I think. But I went ahead and nutshelled the 7 measures for you here. And so we can go through those quickly just so you get the gist. So first is creating a customer service culture, aligning your programs and services with your mission, which is also in a lot of our materials, creating data-driven strategies that are SMART. So as a reminder, that acronym stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. You want to engage members, staff, and leadership. The chief staff executive needs to be a broker of ideas, so you want to collect the good ones and sell them. They're not yours. They don't have to be yours, but you need to share those throughout the organization and make sure that they're brought to people's attention. Adapt to the changing environment and build strategic alliances and partnerships. Again, the R in LERP, I think that's a huge one in leadership. So moving on to ethics. This is kind of considering everything from ethical dilemmas like conflicts of interest, kickbacks, misuse of association property or funds, or incomplete financial reporting. So we're going to dive in a little deeper here. It's important, again, this is under the leadership domain, so making sure that you are leading by example, that you as the CSE maintain the highest degree of personal integrity and professional ethics, that you identify and resolve ethical dilemmas quickly. You don't want to let those hang around because then they get much messier, and that you maintain transparency so that you have a clear policy and a position and that you're communicating that to everyone at every level in the organization. You need to have policies in place, and you need to have in writing whether or not those policies are enforced. Are they just guidelines, or are these, is there a process for actually acting on those if someone doesn't comply with that code? So again, your role as CSE, you want to establish that framework for your staff and your volunteers, everything from conflict of interest policies to annual disclosures, whatever makes sense for your association, but having those in place and clearly communicating that. Communicating and promoting ethical standards established by your association. So again, you as the CSE need to meet the AASLD standard of conduct and model that in your behavior, but your association may also have a code of ethics or a standard of conduct, and that needs to be clearly communicated, and you need to live and breathe that. You need to ensure that the leadership and commitment of you as the CSE is consistent, that it's fair, and that it's, again, widely communicated. So you have to really walk the walk here. So this is actually from an Associations Now article, but I thought it was helpful, and we do love our acronyms. So I'll put a link, or there's a link in the notes section, but I'll put this in the follow-up email. It's a nice little article, but it's a good ethics check, so questions to ask yourself. Is it, you know, if it's a policy, is it consistent with the organization's policies, procedures, and guidelines? Is it legal? Is it acceptable under the laws and regulations? Is it universal? Does it conform to the universal principles and values the organization has adopted? And then look at yourself. Does it satisfy your personal definition of right, good, and fair? So a good gut check there. And something to remember as you're working through a question. So a couple resources. These are links. Again, if you want to click on these, it'll take you to the article. ASAE has some sample code of ethics on their website that might be helpful to you. And then this How Are Your Ethics article from Associations Now was in our kickoff materials from the CAE kickoff in September. So I wanted you to have both of those. So moving on to diversity. This one is actually a lot bigger than maybe some people have given it credit for, so we want to make sure that as the CSE we're considering diversity in the broadest sense possible. So your association's workforce and membership is more diverse than ever, and that's not just race, ethnicity, or gender. It's everything from religion, age, sexual orientation, nationality, disability, physical appearance, geographic location, professional level, interests, learning styles, beliefs, and ideals. That you can go on forever. There's a really nice illustration of this in the Professional Practices book on page 277, and it looks at the 4 layers of diversity, and it starts at the center with personality, moves out to internal dimensions, external dimensions, and then organizational dimensions. And so I would encourage everyone to take a look at that. It's adapted from a couple different resources, but it puts it all together really, really nicely. So with respect to diversity, you want to ensure that your communications, your programs, your products, and your services all reflect diversity. You want to account for every unique aspect of the diverse populations that make up your membership and even your potential membership. So you have to keep a really open mind here and cater to every segment. You want to create a climate of inclusiveness, and that promotes understanding and respect for diversity so that you can make sure it's valued and kind of woven through everything that you do. This includes internal and external audiences. So you as a CSE have to be clear about these values, and there has to be agreement on the core values of the organization. So that integrates diversity, and it allows buy-in from staff and volunteers. This is from ASAE's Diversity and Inclusion Strategic Plan, which is on their website and is a really good resource as well. But it kind of, again, just breaks diversity and inclusion down in a little bit of a different way, and looking at it through a cultural lens, a procedural lens, and then the human lens. So everything from the way we think to the way we do things to the way we are. And I think, especially with associations, that work and learning style is so important. So again, diving deeper, it's more than sensitivity to religious holidays or noting special needs. You need to take it a step further. You need to encourage variety of thought, allow room for constructive conflict. It's a good thing. Programs and services should reflect the diversity of your membership and be inclusive of all of the segments represented. So these are a couple resources on diversity. Again, they're hyperlinked if you want to click on these. There's some really nice things from ASAE here that expand upon these. And then Diversity Journal is a nice resource as well to kind of help you flesh out that definition a little more for yourself. Okay, with move on, and Julie is going to cover interpersonal skills, group facilitation, as well as negotiation.
All right, let me know if you guys see this. Are we good?
Yep.
Great.
Okay, awesome. So this has been a great week, actually, for me. Uh-oh, something just happened. You guys see that?
It's black. Go forward and then go back one. This happened to me once.
Okay. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, Lord. All right.
Okay.
So I'll go back to it. It's been a great week for me. As I was doing the reading and working through the material, it was really interesting how we implement our interpersonal skills, group facilitation, have several negotiations going on. So it was actually, I think, great for me personally to do this. So I hope I can impart to you guys today some of the things I've learned. But I guess all of us have encountered a great leader, and we've all encountered a probably not so great leader. But I think one of the determining factors of a great leader is how they demonstrate their interpersonal relationship skills and group facilitation, all within their own leadership capacity. So, in this section, like everything else, we're going to apply this to our volunteers. We're going to apply this to our staff, because as the CSE, you're leading both of these core constituencies. So, what responsibility does the CSE have for establishing, ensuring a culture that's healthy, has healthy interpersonal relationships, good group dynamics, and group facilitation, and what's the best way to actually build that environment? So I think it's the CSE's responsibility. I don't think I know. Really eliminate any barriers to encourage cross-functional teams, share responsibility when appropriate, share governance. You should be putting systems in place, including the possibility of conflict resolution. We talked about that a little earlier. And obviously, you're going to be facilitating many different groups. And some of us aren't great facilitators. Some of us are. It can be learned. I think the biggest thing to remember with facilitation is that it really involves listening, letting other people talk and share their information. It's to clarify discussions and know when to make meaning out of new ideas. So in developing these interpersonal skills, it's really important to know what motivates your volunteers and what motivates your staff. And I have I should say I've heard that that a couple of these theories, motivational theories, are testable items. So today I'm just going to talk about two of them, but you should make sure you know them. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory is essentially 5 levels of human needs, and they're prioritized, and they're usually fulfilled in order, with survival, or this number 1, the bottom tier there here, as the very basic. And this would be the need for food and shelter. I guess I always kind of equate this to maybe a very small child that really depends on, it has those basic needs. And as you move through life and through your career path, you develop. You get to a point where safety and security is really important, and maybe we can see that in our staff that are just entry-level folks. Coming in, they're just fresh out of college or out of high school, and they need a job, and that's really all they're interested in. And so you, as the CSE, need to be, paying attention to how, what methods you're going to use to motivate these people. And they move through to the affiliation and the social levels as well. But I think what we see here for our volunteers is a lot of our board, I should say our board members, are mostly at that level for ego and recognition. It's really important for them to participate in our society. It helps them in their own career path, the recognition, the ability for them to put their participation on their CV really motivates them and engages them in the society. even further. So like the more recognition they get, probably the more they're invested in the organization as well. So self-actualization can really be seen in our very developed long-term members. These folks may have a giving back attitude. A lot of them are in it for a philanthropic type of reason. We see this through our mentoring program. They're not usually in it for any type of financial gain. It's purely for their own self-satisfaction. So I mentioned our mentoring program. We do have where we pair our, very senior leaders with trainees, and it's this ability for them to develop these young folks' career, and they really do it for a passion of the field and to make sure that they are populating the field with new physicians and scientists that are interested in liver disease. So that's actually a fairly new program for us, and so it's really exciting to see this. But I think as a leader, you have to know that you're not trying to fulfill everybody's motivation. I think the big thing is you need to know where they are on the scale, so that when you do need to motivate them, you know what the right tools to use are. And just recognize that different people come in at different levels. And just, again, it's all about, from a development point of view, so another theory is the Hertzberg theory, and it's really just, whoops. It's based on two things. And it's really it's something either motivates you or demotivates you. The motivators are things that really, that will enhance your productivity, whether it's for the employee or for the volunteer. We could see a performance-based bonus as a motivator, while a hygiene factor are expected benefits. I should say they're benefits. They could be benefits, they could be compensation. They become expected. So what happens is if you take them away, it actually demotivates. It demotivates the person. So, I talked a little bit about performance-based bonuses. An annual bonus, let's say you get a Christmas bonus, could actually be a demotivator. In fact, I have a friend who is executive director of another organization, and their organization has grown significantly over the past couple of years, and they used to give a fairly substantial bonus to their employees, and now they can't do it because their staff increased by double. So they've been really trying to figure out how to continue on with the bonus. But it's actually been really a challenge for her because some people have been very upset and demotivated with not receiving the same amount of money that they used to receive. So again, it's interesting for me to be able to actually apply these things to real life. So effective executives ensure that people have the right tools to get their jobs done. It can include professional development, training, mentoring, facilitating. It's really just making sure you're growing your people in your team or in your organization and using the right tools to grow them and recognizing what the tools are, again, going back to those motivational theories. You need to know where they are in the development stage and then be able to recommend or implement the right resource. Another example for my organization, and maybe yours as well, we have new board members every year. Sometimes they know each other, sometimes they don't know each other. But we build a board orientation, number one, to acclimate them to the society and to let them get to know the staff. And the second thing that we do, I think that's really important for developing their own interpersonal skills with the other group, is we add on a lot of social time to a meeting. Not a lot of time, I should say. We have a couple-day meeting where we spend half the day allowing them to do an activity together. And this really creates a great bond. And what we found is it's built relationships between the group, and it really makes them more effective overall when they're working on really hard items and discussion points. and collaborations or various programs and activities. So I think you have to think about what makes sense for your group or the individual. Facilitation skills are really, really important. You need to know when you're facilitating. You shouldn't be dictatorial, and I think we all know that sometimes the CSE has to make a decision, but not always, and implementing participatory management as a motivator is also very appropriate on occasion as a motivator as well. When it comes to volunteer leadership, I think it's really important from a facilitation point of view that CSE knows that the CEO is responsible for the agenda of the board, and the CSE's job really is to make sure that the board is on target and sticking to processes and allocating the resources to get the job done. So it's kind of here, talking about moving the mission forward. That's what the CSE is going to do in their leadership capacity. So as a leader, I guess you all know you're going to have points in time where you have to compromise. There's going to have to be consensus reached or collaboration. I think that you should know what all three of these are and how they're different, but I think you also need to recognize that they overlap. So compromise is reaching an agreement when you're in dispute. It's kind of in the middle. You may not get everything you want. I actually thought of this as a lot of times in a negotiation, actually, right? Because a little bit of give and take. Consensus is reaching a common goal. It's allowing everybody to have an opportunity to speak, and then eventually get to a point where you can support the common good, and then you can drive it forward. And I guess I throw it out to the group. Does anybody have a great example of consensus? What about strategic planning? Do you guys think that that would be a great, I guess, example of consensus?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day you have to get there. I think we're all silent because it's thinking, yeah, it's not it's not as easy as that definition there, but you're right.
Yeah.
And I like the second bullet that talks about how you agree at the beginning.
Yeah.
How you're going to get to an end point where everyone's okay, where everyone can generally agree with the outcome, that yes, we all want this to happen, even if, sometimes I think people get caught in the weeds and they want to see, well, it needs to happen this certain way, and it's like, well, let's just focus on the goal, and I think that tends to help, at least in our association, of getting people to agree that yes, I mean, in general, this goal is something that we want, and then you can hash out the strategies a little later.
Right, right. So that's what I thought. I thought a lot about our strategic plan, and there were a lot of issues on the table and how to really narrow them down and to get to, to move the agenda forward. They all had to agree. But and collaboration is really working together on a decision or a project. Again, they can overlap, but you should know the difference. Negotiation is part of our daily business. Some people are naturals, and some people have to master the skill. But the idea is that you're listening and that you can communicate back what you've heard. As a CSE, one of the most important skills is actually to negotiate, right? Because we do this every day. We negotiate organization to organization. We negotiate, or you may negotiate with your board, for example, or your CEO. You may need a new staff person or a consultant, and you may have to negotiate what the terms are to get that person. And of course, you're negotiating with your staff every day. To be effective, you need to make good plans. You need to set high expectations, create energy, be a good listener, and also be persistent. So So really, what is it, right? It's getting agreement, it's keeping agreement, it's win-win. And what I want to say here is that it's win-win, it's mutual gain, and I think that's really important. It's not equal winning, it's not, there's nothing equitable about it. You're going to have to probably give something up to get something, but it is definitely win-win in the end. If it's one-sided, it's definitely not going to work. And there's a resource here. I didn't link it, sorry guys, but Chester Carras has some books and such that if you're interested in doing further reading, may be a good place to go. I don't know if anything will be on the exam regarding this, but definitely somewhere to go. So here are 3 requirements for successful negotiation. So the terms can be varied. It can't be all or nothing. And they may be changed. What may be good for one person, maybe it's good for the other person, maybe it's not. But it also centers on a scarce resource. So it may be financial, a financial resource that's scarce. It may be that somebody doesn't have the time or the talent. And it's not always about the money as far as something to gain. It could be about the mission as well. So there is a misconception out there that sometimes it's a competition, and it's not a competition. It's really for you each to be gaining something in a partnership. Uh-oh. Sorry. So 3 principles. And I'm thinking maybe there are more things. Again, and I want to throw this out to the question. I want to throw this out to the group, sorry, which is, why do you guys think that speaking first is and setting the tone so important? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I guess because I ask you that because sometimes I question. I'm often not the person who will speak first. I tend to listen, but I think I understand what they're saying here, which is really it's not necessarily to have to get the first word in. I think it's really about setting the tone and making it positive. And to do this, by the way, you want to rehearse. They talk about no second chances. We've all heard that. You have no second chance to make a first impression. So as you're going forward in a negotiation, you want to think about who's doing the talking as well. Is it the volunteer or is it the staff person? Who's best suited to kick that off? It's important to know that asking a lot of questions determines the direction and the content of the negotiation. It also allows for effective listening as well. So, just because you're asking questions, also don't just assume that you've prepared enough in advance that you know the answer. You need to listen to what their answer is, because it may be unexpected in what you thought the answer was. Also, I just wanted to bring into a little nugget here that talks about conflicts and conflict resolution. And sometimes, if a negotiation is going on, you can maybe resolve conflict by asking a lot of questions and trying to direct the decision making onto it to your position as well. So leverage is actually gain understanding all points of view. Again, it goes down to listening. You need to be able to state, and you need to be able to understand what the other party's case is. And you also need to think about it again in advance and think about what you think the answers are. So yesterday, this happened at a staff level, actually, where there was a question asked, and as I thought about the question, I thought about what the negotiation would be. I really tried to think about what their answers would be to try to prepare myself in advance, again, for the discussion. So that's really important, because I'd like to stress that. But again, your advanced prep work shouldn't compromise your effective listening. So there's some golden rules of negotiation, and the exam will most likely give you an example of how to apply these golden rules. But I think first and foremost, the position of trust is really important. If you don't trust the group that you're negotiating with, you'll never believe that they're going to fulfill their end of the agreement. That I think from the very beginning it goes down to you need to trust the other person. You need to be a very careful communicator. That's again our advanced prep work. You need to know when to call a timeout. If a conflict is escalating, that's probably not a good thing. You need to either agree to a time to come back and cool down a little bit. We talked about questioning. You don't want to make counter proposals because in the end it's going to muddy the water. I think one of the you think about Congress and they go back and forth, and at the end of the day, then what do you end up with? A very, very muddy picture. So you really need to know what your position is, and focus on that, what that strongest position is, and work to agreement on that. And you know what? Also, you need to set a deadline. You need to keep movement rolling, and you need to set a positive environment and climate. There was in professional practices there was a list in there called the 4 Ps, and it talked about avoid escalating conflicts or conflict in general, and interpersonal skills, and using the 4 Fs, and it was feel, felt, found, facts, and using this method, these words, to question within the if you're going toward a conflict, using that questioning method again to help resolve anything that may be going negatively there. So another interesting fact, and I wish I had the numbers, but I was actually talking with my boss about employment contracts this week as well, and he told me that there was really an unusually high number of CSEs that don't have written contracts. And he didn't have the number offhand, but he said he was very, very surprised about that, and I was as well. So I guess in addition to using attorney as a nugget, which would be a best practice, is to have a written contract. There's a chapter in the law book on this, page 46 to 55. I'm not, my book, I think I have an older book, so I'm not sure if this is right for all the books that you guys have. But in general, you want your contract to have a term limit on there. What's the nature and the CSE's responsibilities? How often are they going to be reviewed? Is the contract automatically renewed? What is the title of the CSE? It's probably going to address your compensation and benefits, including severance, and the compensation and benefits part, and business expenses as well. This is, again, going to go back to really important to have an attorney because of the tax implications, for example, and deferred compensation. But you can read more about that in the law handbook. Are there any questions? All right. So really quick, Mary talked to us today about the general leadership and what the characteristics of a good leader are, that they're an agent of change. They have to manage a lot of data, and they have to balance a lot of priorities and provide strategic leadership to staff and volunteers. It's really important for us to hold high standards of conduct, and we need to lead by example. We need to understand that if there's a problem, from an ethical point of view, that we should quickly resolve the issues, and that we should be transparent. Diversity. Our activities should reflect all the diverse populations, and we need to be sensitive to more than just religious holidays, and we need to, within our organization at a staff level and a volunteer level, we need to have that culture of inclusiveness. We talked about a little bit about interpersonal skills and how important it is for the CSE to recognize professional development and personal development, to be a coach and a mentor, and to be able to facilitate groups and use effective and ethical negotiation skills to achieve consensus and to build conflict resolution skills into our daily lives in order to resolve any differences. So again, this is a nice cheat sheet that was developed for you guys to use as a study tool. Okay, so now I'm going to say again, are there any questions?
Can you repeat the 4 F's?
Oh, yep. It was feel, felt. Did I get 4? Feel, felt, found, and facts.
Found
So how do you feel? I kind of felt this way, or it feels this way. I found out this information, and here's the facts. You know, I wish sorry, my office is a disarray here because I got a new desk about 30 minutes before we started this program. But it is in the PPAM, and I think it may be under negotiation. I guess it's under negotiation. And I'm sorry, I don't have the page number. Anything else? Okay, so Mary and I talked about just doing a quick review of the exam and maybe some tips on exam taking. And before we get into practice questions here, we thought we'd just remind you that everything centers around one of these content area items. There's going to be a stem on the question. The stem is kind of, I guess, really the scenario, and then you're going to be given several options. There'll be one key, and that's the answer, and then there's going to be a number of distractors. Usually, you can narrow it down to 2, and then there may be 2 that you're going to have to think about a little bit more and figure out which one's the best practice. Anything to add, Mary, on this?
Nope, looks great.
Okay. Test taking quick tips. Read the darn question. They can be tricky. So you may be thinking you're reading about, Mary said earlier, about something in administration, and it really could be a leadership question. So make sure you take the time to read it and look for keywords, first, next, subsequently, consequently, or furthermore, he, she. Use your SPY method, LERP, know all these acronyms, know when to put them in place. Oh, another part, another great way to narrow your answers down is to use the true-false method. So as you're reading the answers, is it true or is it false? And you can use a process of elimination that way. And we talked about best practice, most correct answer wins, and the most effective practices are not the best practices. So here's another interesting thing that I saw. It said, of course, we all know this, right? Get a good night's sleep. This is when you're getting ready to go take the test. Eliminate your distractions. Take your time on the questions. You may want to pace yourself. It's a 4-hour test, so maybe draw some lines in between question 50, 100, 150, 200, and you can either put the time where you think you're going to finish, it's maybe 1 hour, 2 hour, maybe you want to give yourself 1 hour every 50 questions, but it also would be maybe a good point for you to take a break. Question 50, maybe it's maybe stand up and stretch. Question 100, maybe you go the restroom or something. Other advice, I thought this was great, right? Don't wear an itchy sweater. And you guys, the exam's in December, so really be comfortable. And what else? Does anybody else have anything they want to add? All right. All right, so practice questions. Anybody want to take this question? All right, I'll read it, and then you guys can answer it. How about that? A member has been accused of a code of ethics violation. Which of the following is not necessarily for the association to provide? So notice of a hearing, opportunity to examine the evidence, the source of the accusation, or the right to counsel in a hearing. Okay, I'm not answering it, so somebody needs to answer the question out there.
Probably C.
C. Yes. Great.
I would say C.
All right. So our next question. While negotiating a vendor contract, progress stalls. In considering a next move, the chief staff executive must be prepared to make an undesirable concession to jumpstart the negotiations. How do you guys feel about that?
I'd say B.
Yeah. Walk away from the table. Yep. Yeah, walk away from the table is probably your best answer. And timing is key to this question. So obviously A is no good because that's really not good for the undesirable concession to jump. That's just not good for the organization. You could bring a third party in for mediation, but it may be, it depends on what it's a vendor contract, right? So probably not. All right, moving on. So during his first board meeting, a board member is inappropriately lobbying members regarding another board member. Which of the following is the most appropriate first course of action for the CSE? Discuss the problem with the board president and ask the president to address the matter with the member. Discuss the behavior with the member. C, hire a consultant to conduct the training session on appropriate board activity. Remind board members about appropriate and inappropriate activity. So, what do you guys think?
That's a touchy one.
I think that the answer is B. I think I recall seeing that, but I'm glad that you brought this question up because this was one of the ones I was studying that had as an example very similar to this that I didn't quite agree with the answer or what they said, and I didn't quite understand it. But my guess would be B, but I'd like input from the group.
So does anybody remember that M2M, member to member?
Yeah.
So we implemented that. Do you want me to move to the answer here, or you guys want to discuss?
I think it's A.
It's kind of a, yeah.
It is A. And I think,
Okay.
it comes down to it's member to member. It's CSE to the CEO, and it would probably, from my perspective, would be it's the job of the CEO, member to member, to talk to that other board member about that. All right. A successful negotiation can be described as each party equally wins, there are no concessions given, winning when counter proposals are negotiated, and win-win because each of the parties have mutually gained. Okay, this one's easy, right?
D.
D, yeah. I think, yeah, mutually gained is the key word there. All right, next. The board sharply divided about whether to increase membership dues. An argumentative, emotional discussion at the last board meeting leads to a deadlock. The most effective method for the chairman is to develop board consensus. The most effective method for the chairman is to develop board consensus is to. Sorry, I can't read today, obviously. Postpone the issue for the next meeting, which is in 4 months. Assign several members to develop a compromise recommendation and report back the next day. Remind each of the board members of his or her fiduciary responsibilities. Allow the most vocal board members to debate the issue as long as necessary. So there's some conflict getting ready to go on in this one, right? Because the board's divided and folks are getting emotional, and they're at a deadlock. So what do we do? What do you guys think we need to do?
Well, B makes more sense, but I don't like the fact that they have to report back in a very short time period. That's the only thing that really bothers me about B.
Oh, but remember what you want to do with conflicts.
Right.
What are the golden rules? What are some of the golden rules?
You want to identify and resolve quickly.
That, I'm thinking.
I would say C.
So let's do the what doesn't work, right? So allow this one. Whoops, sorry guys.
Oh, okay. Decide whether.
So I was going to say, obviously, we can, this one right here. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. This one right here is definitely out, right?
Right.
I mean, we're not, and again, is it we're talking about fiduciary here? Again, it's how do we get, I don't know. See, I would be stuck on this one myself too, because I guess it depends on, oh shoot, I did it again, sorry. Oh gosh. Let's go, there we go. I don't know, I guess I would be stuck between these two. I think this is a tough question. Because again, I guess when things are getting heated, sometimes you need to call things off. But 4 months is a long time. So.
Right, and then when you resolve it quickly, they don't have as much time. People can't come back and argue. You've made the decision at the board meeting, and that everyone leaves with the same decision. So there's not an opportunity for it to just balloon out of control.
Yeah, quickly is a relative term, though, because in some organizations, quickly could be 4 months, just because of their corporate governance and the way that they do business.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like to me that, I guess the best idea is what they did is they must have had to agree to allow several members to work through the issue and come up with the compromise. And that's why we talked about, they could all overlap, right, and be intertwined, compromise, collaboration, and consensus. So I guess they decided that we're going to go with the compromise to get consensus. All right. So a reminder, on Tuesday, October 28th, there's a chat. It's free. And on Halloween, we'll be getting together again, working on Domain 8 with Rachel and Kim and Jeanette. And thank you, guys. We're like 5 minutes early.
Yay!
Thank you.
Was there anything anyone got hung up on that we need to find more resources for you on, or did everything seem to make sense? Okay.
All righty.